It was a rainy day, and large drops of rain fell on the ground and on the people who were passing through the avenue at this time of night. No one paid any attention to the old woman named Isadora who was walking slowly along the street. The raindrops fell on her wrinkled cheeks and on her old clothes. Her old coat was carefully patched, and her old boots were about to fall apart. A large scarf covered her head, and in her hand she held a piece of paper that she kept looking at and looking around. This seemed to be the place. Here it was, the right number. I had finally arrived. Isadora breathed a sigh of relief. She stopped in front of a fancy restaurant. Well-dressed people drove expensive cars and entered with satisfied faces. "You only have time to ask for money," one of the men said carelessly as he passed Isadora. But she did not seem to have heard the unpleasant remark. She opened the large glass doors and stood for a moment, looking at the ornate walls and the fine furniture, then approached the reception desk. A friendly young woman named Clarissa, who had been smiling a minute ago, frowned and said reluctantly, "You must have the wrong address. Please leave the restaurant immediately or I will call security." "My dear, I am not leaving. I have a reservation and I have money," Isadora replied, not understanding why she could not enter. "Are you kidding me? This is a respectable place, not a place for the likes of you." "Go away," Isadora was stunned with surprise. Why was she being treated like a beggar? True, her clothes were old, but they were always clean and odorless, and her hair was clean. "I have never asked for money from strangers, even in the most difficult times," she thought to herself. Her thoughts were interrupted by Clarissa's firm voice. "Arlo, come here immediately." A young man in uniform approached the reception desk. "What's the matter, Clarissa? Is there a problem?" "Yes, look." She said she needed to come in and she paid for a table. "Do something." The security guard Arlo looked closely at Isadora, feeling embarrassed. "What can we do?" "Let's check if she's right." "Show me your reservation." Isadora carefully took a handkerchief from her coat pocket and began to unfold it slowly until a piece of paper appeared in her hand. "Here, take it." She handed Arlo her passport. "So your name is Isadora, 80 years old." Arlo was surprised. "Look, you must have misunderstood. This is not a restaurant for people like you. It's better to leave her outside," Clarissa challenged. "No, I need to get to this restaurant." "Check. I have a reservation," Isadora insisted. Arlo dialed the number and the answer surprised him. "Yes, there is a reservation and it's even paid. But I'm sorry, this is a high-class restaurant, only for the rich and respected people in town." "We don't want you here," Clarissa intervened again. Isadora was offended to hear that. Why were these people treating her like this? She had done nothing wrong to them. In her youth, this had never happened. We always helped each other through thick and thin. Isadora was confused, but she knew why she was here and she wasn't about to back down. "I didn't come here to eat. I need to see the owner," she said. Clarissa and Arlo were both confused. Clarissa became angry when she saw Isadora silently take her reservation and start walking up the long stairs. She didn't understand what was going to happen as she got closer. Clarissa became angry with Arlo, the guard. "What am I supposed to do?" Arlo replied. "Don't worry, the director will kick her out soon and so will we. You have no idea how hard I worked to get this job here. And I don't want to lose it just because of some old lady. I'll call the director and report it." "What day is it today? I wonder why she came here." Isadora struggled to climb the stairs, making her legs ache. Finally, the seemingly endless staircase ended. She sighed. She opened the heavy door and stepped into a crowded hall. The lights were shining brightly in the form of colored lamps hanging everywhere, making Isadora close her eyes. The tables were beautifully decorated, filled with all kinds of dishes. The waiters walked around with golden trays in their hands, and on the chairs sat gentlemen in expensive suits and women in gorgeous evening gowns. Isadora felt uncomfortable, but in just a moment she caught the contemptuous gaze of a man who pointed his finger directly at her. "What is this? This is not a homeless shelter. Look." "Hey waiter, didn't you hear me?" "Yes, of course, I'll report it to the manager." "We'll deal with this right away, don't worry," the waiter hurriedly replied. "That's right, this homeless person is so bold. They're entering the restaurant now." "Why isn't the security guard watching this?" a woman in a sparkling dress said. Isadora closed her eyes, horrified. She had never experienced such humiliation before. She just wanted to disappear from this place. Another girl continued to speak and pointed at her. "It's probably because of the alcohol. You can't control your emotions. Isn't it a bit late for you to enter a restaurant? At your age, you should think about retiring forever. Would you like to sit at our table?" "Just don't sit near me. I'm allergic to the smell of people living on the streets." The arrogant woman's loud laughter echoed throughout the restaurant. Isadora tried not to cry at this injustice. "What's wrong with me? Yes, I'm old, but that's no reason to mock and shame me in public. They'll grow old and weak. Why can't they understand that? When I was young, this never happened. We always respected our elders no matter how much money they had in their pockets, Isadora wondered, but couldn't say anything out loud. But unfortunately, the old woman's mockery continued. Shouts rang out from all over, "I didn't pay to see a homeless person. Why do we have to put up with this? What is the manager doing? I'll close this restaurant." The waiters hid in corners and whispered to each other. Many felt sorry for Isadora, but no one dared to speak up in front of the drunken crowd. These people come here to have fun, but more importantly, to show off their status. Working in a place like this is prestigious. The owner of the restaurant is not stingy and pays well. No one wants to lose this prestigious job. Only one girl, a waitress named Lila, felt very uncomfortable. She hated seeing a woman being insulted just because she was old and not wearing expensive clothes. Aren't they human? How can you mock an old person like that? "I'll go right now to talk to the restaurant manager. Tell him what's going on here," Lila said firmly. "You won't get anywhere. The manager will favor the customers because they bring profit to the restaurant, and she will be fired. No one wants her here. You've only been working here for less than a week. Maybe you shouldn't take such a risk." The entire waitress team agreed. "There are things in life that are more precious than money, but you don't seem to know them," Lila said before leaving the room. The situation became completely unbearable. A man staggered up to Isadora, arrogantly saying, "Then why don't you sing or dance for us here? Come on, come on," and the man clapped his hands loudly. His silly idea was immediately supported by the others. The audience laughed loudly. Isadora couldn't bear this humiliation any longer. Her heart ached, tears rolled down her cheeks, her legs began to tremble, and she walked towards the exit. But before she could take a few steps, the door to the room opened and a tall man appeared in the doorway. He looked around at the people sitting at the tables and loudly asked, "Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? Is everything okay?" Isadora couldn't take her eyes off the man who had just entered, as if she were paralyzed. "My dear Scott, you have grown up, matured, and look so much like your father." Those eyes and that chin. Tears welled up in her eyes again. But this time it was an unexpected joy, so great that for a moment, Isadora forgot all about the pain and humiliation she had endured. But Scott, the man, paid no attention to her. He was more concerned with pleasing his regular guests. "Scott, everything is fine as usual," except one of the men pointed at Isadora. "What is she doing here? You have to admit she doesn't belong here." "Yes, take her out. Don't embarrass us and ruin our evening," the rest of the audience agreed. "Of course, this is just a misunderstanding and we will clear it up right away. To make up for it, there will be free dessert tonight. No one will bother you again, ladies and gentlemen. And please follow me," Scott said, turning to Isadora. The old woman could not believe her ears. Was that her Scott? He was a grown and steady man now, but to her he was still just a child. And now he was kicking her out. What a shame. The insults and humiliations from the customers in the restaurant were nothing compared to what Scott had said. "No, I'm not leaving until I talk to him. He needs to know the truth," she thought. Lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice Scott taking out his wallet and starting counting the money. "Here, take this. It's all I can do for you." At that moment, Isadora's heart felt like it was going to explode into pieces, but she still found the strength to say, "Scott, I won't take the money. Please let me stay and talk to you." Scott felt his patience running out. "I have a homeless person in my room, and I don't know how to get rid of her," he thought. Scott felt frustrated thinking about the situation. He felt himself losing his patience. Wasting time and chatting with strangers was not in his character. "Sorry, I'm a very busy person. I don't have time to talk to strangers." "Don't get me wrong," Scott said. "I'm not a stranger. I'm your mother, Isadora," the older woman said, trying to hold back her tears. The manager, Melina, and the guard, Arlo, looked at each other. "I told you, she's not suitable. You shouldn't have let her in," Melina said. Scott didn't believe Isadora's words. "Look, this is too much. Why are you lying? My mother died many years ago. As for the money, it's your right. Whether you accept it or not is up to you. But I'll have to ask you to leave after a few minutes." Scott disappeared from sight. "What are you standing there for?" "Hurry up," Arlo ordered. Isadora could barely stand. She was shocked by Scott's words. Arlo closed the door behind her. The old woman sat down on a nearby bench, exhausted, and cried. It was dark outside, everything was ruined, and she had been saving up from her small pension for a long time to pay for a seat in the restaurant where her son worked. Finally, the long-awaited day had arrived. That morning, Isadora had imagined the moment when she would meet her son, tell him everything so that she could at least see him once in a while he was still alive. In her joy, she did not notice that the cold wind had begun to blow in the afternoon. Her hands were cold and her old gloves were gone. She must have dropped them, but that did not matter now. The old woman reached into her coat pocket and unexpectedly found an envelope. "How could I forget? Here's a picture of Scott as a baby in this envelope. He was only 6 years old in this picture. He'll definitely remember. And then he'll listen to me, the old woman exclaimed. After all the humiliation and insults she had endured, she hadn't had time to say the most important thing to her son. Isadora decided to wait until her son got off work, and then finally talk to him. Time passed, it seemed like an eternity. Finally, the door opened, and Scott and a few others walked out of the restaurant. He opened the car door and said indifferently to the driver, "Let's go home, wait." "Honey," Isadora shouted with the last of her strength. "So it's you too?" "Listen, go peacefully, or I'll have to take drastic measures and call the police," Scott replied coldly and got into the car. "Wait," Scott ordered the driver when he saw the photo in Isadora's hand. He got out of the car and asked in confusion, "Where did you get this photo?" "When I was 6 years old, a photographer came to visit us, and we took this photo as a souvenir." "Don't you remember that?" Scott thought for a moment and said, "I have 2 photos, but the second one is gone." "Luckily, it's not gone," Isadora said firmly. Scott knew that this photo had followed him from the orphanage, then to his adoptive family, and now it was in an old photo album. "But they told me my mother died of a heart attack," Scott wondered, but couldn't find an answer. "Hey, you're freezing. Come on, I'll buy you a cup of tea and we'll talk," Scott offered. Isadora happily agreed, finally getting to talk to her son. But even though the old woman's heart had calmed down, something strange was still happening in Scott's mind. Emotions began to overwhelm him, and strange feelings welled up inside him. Mixed emotions of hatred and joy filled Scott's soul. Hatred for his mother abandoning him, and joy at finally seeing her again. Scott was lucky to have a foster family. His adoptive parents gave him everything: a home, a good education, and a nurturing environment. But they were very strict in their demands. Scott always felt deprived of love from his parents, and he wondered if things would have been different if he had lived with Beast's biological mother. Why did she abandon me? And now she suddenly wants to find me. Is it too late to change anything? Scott said. "Son, listen to me. I will tell you everything. Just don't interrupt me," Isadora said, trying to stay calm. Mom was born into a large family. Mom had 7 children, and she was the eldest. Mom's father died early, and her younger siblings all grew up, got married, and moved away. Mom stayed in the family home without a husband, without children, without a stable family. This pleased Mom, but Mom felt that her life was meaningless. Then one day Thomas came to the city, and Mom fell in love with him immediately. Mom reluctantly accepted. She had nowhere else to go, but Mom's joy didn't last long. Thomas drowned, and Mom was in so much pain she felt like she was dying of sadness. But the problems didn't stop there. Mom died of a heart attack, and Mom was left alone. Life seemed meaningless until Mom received the good news from you. Mom found out that she was pregnant with you, and you were the best thing that had ever happened to her. Mom took care of you, loved you, and loved you. Isadora said, "What you say is nonsense. Why did you betray me, put me in an orphanage? Do you know that I don't remember anything about your care, but I remember very clearly the terrible years I spent in the orphanage. If you come here to ask for forgiveness, don't expect me to forgive you. Even your old age won't help," Scott said with resentment. The hope in Isadora's heart quickly faded. She had hoped so much that the photo she brought with her would improve her relationship with her son, but unfortunately it didn't. "Son, please wait, I'll explain everything," she began, but Scott cut her off abruptly. "I don't need your explanations. I don't believe you." "Anyway," Scott said, "many years have passed since then, and he is now almost 60 years old. But the memories of his childhood never fade. He clearly remembers how every Sunday at the orphanage, he hoped his mother would come to take him home. But that never happened. Instead, a foster family came. Isadora doesn't know how to apologize to her son for that. She always remembers the day she brought little Scott to the orphanage. The boy looked at her with tearful eyes and begged her not to leave him in someone else's home. But she had no choice. "Son, believe me, I had no choice. My heart problem started a long time ago. At first it was just discomfort, but then severe pain and heart attacks. If you knew how much I blamed myself for not going to the doctor sooner, when I left, it was too late. The doctor said that only surgery could save my life, and the chances of survival were very small. Even if I survived, I would have to stay in the hospital for a long time. Son, I'm sorry I was so scared. I had no one to leave you with. I begged my brothers and sisters to take care of you. And while I was in the hospital, they came to visit me. But they all had children, and they made excuses that they had too many mouths to feed. I thought I was just leaving you temporarily while I was in the hospital. But then suddenly a miracle happened. The surgery was successful, and I was discharged after a month and a half. I went to the orphanage to pick you up. But what I feared most happened. You were given to foster parents. I frantically begged for the family's address, but the orphanage director refused. From that moment on, my life had no meaning. I kept dreaming that one day I would see you again, no matter what. Today is the best day. All my dreams have come true. I saw you again." Scott stared at Isadora's face and eyes for a long time, trying to remember his mother's features, but he couldn't. He had no pictures of her, and time had faded her memory from his mind. Isadora spoke of her life with such sincerity that Scott realized her words didn't sound like lies. It might have been a fairy tale, but he believed it. "How did you find me after all these years?" Scott asked. "I'll tell you, son. About a year ago, I met a woman in the park who I've worked with for a long time. Her daughter is the founder of a charity that helps place children in foster homes. This may not be entirely true, but she did some research on your foster family, and she helped me find you. You're a successful and intelligent person, and I'm very proud of you," Isadora said. Isadora understood that Scott probably wouldn't be able to forgive her right away. Betrayal from a mother is not easy to undo, but she hoped that one day he would be able to understand and forgive her. That forgiveness would be the most precious reward she could receive. The long silence was broken by Scott. "How are you doing now? How is your health?" "You look," Scott fumbled, not knowing how to express himself. "Many people have told me that today. I lost my parents' house. My sister's children, my nieces, have tricked me and taken my place, but I still have a place to live. I rent a small room. Don't worry about me, son. The important thing is that you are doing well," Isadora replied. They didn't realize how much time had passed as they talked. It was dark and it was still raining outside. "Can I take you home?" Scott asked abruptly. "Yes, of course, son," Isadora agreed. "Let's stop here. I live nearby. It's only a few minutes away," she said quickly. "Are you sure?" "Maybe I should come with you," Scott suggested. "Don't worry. Thank you for listening." "I will pray for you for the rest of my life," Isadora said. She had told Scott the whole truth, except for one thing she had kept from him. The thing she was ashamed to say. She lived on the street for a long time, and then a man who worked in the yard where she liked to sit took pity on her. He was a janitor and had a small room on the street with cleaning supplies, a small sofa and a chair. That was where Isadora lived now. Isadora sat down on the sofa, her legs and head aching, but she felt happy for the first time in years. That night she had the best dream of her life, a dream in which she was with her son. A few days later, Scott appeared at her door. "How did you find me?" Isadora asked in surprise. "I found you. Now it's your turn," Scott replied, smiling. "Come with me," Scott suggested. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I'll introduce you to my wife and your grandchildren." "You have 3 grandchildren," Scott said. Isadora was overjoyed. Then Scott handed her a key. "I have a small apartment. No one has lived there for a long time. And now you will live there," Scott said. Isadora had almost lost hope, but in the end happiness came to her like the warm sunshine of summer. That happiness was given by her son, who was able to understand and forgive.